Hi, and welcome to Dwelling Place. We hope you are encouraged and inspired as you listen to this message. Enjoy.
So who are we? We would say that we are a Jesus people church. Now, there are three really easy words that we can associate ourselves as a local church. And when we move to this part around people, there's this statement that we wrote, and it says this. It says, we are a courageous people pursuing those in the midst of this human project and walking in step with his spirit to transform hearts, homes, and humanity. And so over these next few weeks, I really want to hone in on what this looks like and how this, I guess, aligns with us as a people and how we can play a part in seeing God active in the lives of people. We are courageous people pursuing those in the midst of this human project. We are a courageous people. Originally, when we were toying around with words and language and everything like that, we had in there, we are an unafraid people. And over time, I was sort of like, you know what, it just doesn't fit. I don't like it. It's not me. I don't like the language. And over time, I was like, no, we're a courageous people. And some of you this morning may be sitting here and you may have thoughts and ideas around what courage means or what it looks like, and you sort of might be sitting there going, well, I'm not so sure that that's me. I want to encourage you this morning that no matter where you are along the journey of being a courageous person, if you find yourself in this house, that sits with you. And I'm going to speak this over us so hard and so heavy today that as we go out into our own worlds, into our homes, into our streets, into our communities and our workplaces, we find ourselves taking steps of courage that maybe we never would have considered previously. So what is courage? There's all these different definitions, but I've essentially come to this. Courage is the fruit of conviction. Courage is the fruit of conviction. There was this gentleman by the name of Desmond Doss. You may not have heard of him, but you may have heard of the movie which was made about him, which was Hacksaw Ridge. And so Desmond Doss was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he had this personal conviction that he should never use a gun, he should never carry a gun, and he never wanted to bring harm to a human life. Now that becomes a major challenge when you're conscripted to the army in World War II. But he remained true to his conviction. And so he was put in the army as a non-combatant, and he would look after people, and he was in medical fields. And what happened in early 1945 was he was looking after his soldiers. He was looking after them in the medical field. And what happened was he found his unit being attacked in Okinawa. So he was a field medic, and his unit's being attacked, and it was up this cliff, and he was hearing about everything that was happening, and he was now in a position where it was like, well, what do I do? Do I take up arms and fight? Do I remain true to my conviction and help? Or do I shrink back and withdraw and stay away from everything? And so he made this decision. I'm not going to take up arms, but I'm going to save my fellow soldiers. And so he creates this stretcher with ropes and pulleys and creates this system where he would now be able to go and find his fellow soldiers that had been injured on the field of battle, bring them back under fire, put them on stretchers and lower them down and get them to safety and begin to work on them medically. It takes major courage. But I'm telling you, without the conviction that laid within him, courage never rises. And so Desmond Doss gets all these great awards and this celebration because he ends up saving, some say 75, but then there's others that sort of say anywhere from 50 to 100 men individually. Every single time he went up into that battlefield, dodging bullets and war, and brought somebody down, he had to make that decision again. Am I going to go again? am I going to go again? Martin Luther King Jr. says this: courage is an inner resolution to go forward in spite of obstacles. See, we love these stories like Desmond Doss, these stories of great courage, and we find all these heroes and we want to align ourselves with them because to us, that's what courage looks like. But really, for most of us, courage is being able to pick up and make a phone call to somebody that we know that we've wronged. It's being able to sit down with our spouse across the dinner table and have a conversation with them because we know that we've said something or done something that may have hurt them. It's being able to walk with our children and maybe apologize to them or show them a course-correcting action for them to be better people and who they are. That's really where courage lies for most of us. I remember watching my boy have to do a recital and go up and be graded, and he had to walk up in front of everybody and take his cello up there and sit down and then play this piece of music. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart's beating, my palms are sweating, going, everything you do is going to reflect me, son. No. Although you're laughing because you know it's you too. I'm thinking, man, this kid, I can't clap in time, but he's got to play this piece of music under this pressure in front of people while somebody's marking him. I chatted to my daughter and I say, what's the most courageous thing you've had to do recently? And she says, I had to go ice skating with my friends. And it sounds funny, right? Except until we place ourselves in that position. I don't ice skate. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to put them on. I'm going to fall over. I'm going to get humiliated and embarrass myself. But for the conviction of a friendship and fun, courage had to rise. A conviction is simply something that we're convinced of. And being convinced of the value of humanity, it produced a courage under fire for Desmond Doss. My question to you this morning, which you may or may not be able to answer immediately, would be this: what are your convictions? What are the things that you hold on to? What are the things that drive your decision making? Honesty, integrity, or just outcomes and entitlement? I don't know what they are, but we need to be honest with ourselves and we need to be able to answer those questions, because when we understand our convictions, we will know how and whether that will produce courage. This is a message for you. This is a message for me. To be able to cultivate a courageous people. And this morning you may be sitting here. You may be scared. You may be shrinking back. You may be stuck. Or you may be stirred and on fire for God. It doesn't really matter where you find yourself on the spectrum of courage. My prayer is this: that you will hear this message and you'll understand that we are a courageous people. I am a person of courage. So where do I find courage? You know, light is a very difficult thing to describe unless you've experienced darkness. In the backdrop of darkness, you can fully identify light. And so it is with courage. Challenge, difficulty, fear, uncertainty, intimidation. They are all the backdrop that will identify courage. And when we face these things, these problems, we have a decision to make. What's my conviction and how am I going to respond? So we have this problem which lays in front of us. Am I going to voluntarily address it and confront it, or am I going to shrink back and withdraw? let me tell you this, that voluntary self-sacrifice takes courage. And the epitome of this is found in the person of Jesus. Because there was some things that he had to deal with, which was called the sin of the world. And we know through Scripture that he had an opportunity to walk away from it, because he says this, he says, God, not my will, but yours. I really don't want to do this. This is going to be a challenge. This is confronting, and I know the pain that's going to happen as I walk through this. But where there's sacrifice, where there's courage, we can find fulfillment. Christ takes the sin of the world onto himself. All the problems become his. And to deal with it requires courage upon courage. This is what Peterson says. It's a great quote and picture of God. He says, the spirit of unlimited courage is not a bad start for a definition of what constitutes the divine. This is where we find courage. So how do we live with courage? How do we outwork courage? So we know what it is, we know where it's found, but how does this actually actively play a part in my life? And there's 4 points to this morning. So in Jeremiah 29, many of us would know Jeremiah 29:11. There's this great verse which talks about the plans and the purposes that God has for us. So what we love to do is we love to take that, we love to claim it, we love to hold on to it, we love to forget about everything else around it. And so this morning, I just want to help bring context to what's going on in this passage of the Bible and allow us to understand that it adds a greater fulfillment to who we are as people when we see it in the context of how it's presented. Jeremiah 29 verse 1, it says this. It says, this is the text of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent to Jerusalem to the surviving elders among the exiles and to the priests, the prophets, and all the other people Nebuchadnezzar had carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. So what had happened is we'd had the Israelites, they were placed in exile, they were carried away from their homeland. And this is what had been going on, and it says in that first part of that verse, this is the text of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent to Jerusalem to the surviving elders among the exiles. Because of the survivors, Jeremiah actually had an audience to write to. To survive at its base level is to be alive. And so many times we can become critical of people that are just surviving, that are just breathing, that are just getting through. But really, there's this point where we need to start where Jeremiah actually had an audience to write to. Bear Grylls says survival can be summed up in these 3 words: never give up. That's the heart of it, really. Just keep trying. Survival is an attitude of the mind and a courage of the heart. It's necessary, but it's not everything. It provides an opportunity to finish and to flourish. Survival is the ability to hold on and to hold on and to hold on. Seneca, a Roman philosopher and statesman, said this: sometimes even to live is an act of courage. It's like, geez, Doug, this is really inspiring this morning. But I'm telling you, there's people in this place, and you getting up and going again is an act of courage. And God sees it, and God recognizes it, and God applauds you for it. We need survivors. There's darkness in some of our minds. There's intimidation in some of our relationships. There's pressure in our workplaces. There's fear of what the future may look like. But I need to encourage us this morning to remain, to stand, to survive. and to take courage. We love all the game shows and the reality shows where people can get like an immunity idol so that they're not affected or they're not impacted. We love it when we can leave the island and go somewhere full of comfort and pleasure. But it's like, it's a game show, guys. It doesn't happen for the vast majority of people. There's no immunity idol so that life won't confront you. There's no way that you can step out of the circumstances of what you're going through right now so that you can take a 2-week break back at home and then come back and play the game again. The first step is to survive. The second point was this, to step in verse 4, it says this is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says to all the captives he had exiled to Babylon from Jerusalem: build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children. Then find spouses for them so that they may have many grandchildren. Multiply, do not dwindle away. The NIV says it like this: increase and do not decrease. There's this Eden ideal which is set up in Genesis. And the idea is this: to reign and rule, to build and cultivate, and then enjoy what your work produces. This is the story of the garden in Genesis. And God is saying here, even in the harshness of the environment that you find yourself in, even when you find your place exiled from the ideal, I'm reminding you where I first positioned you. I'm reminding you of how you represent me and how you outwork what you've been called to outwork. He reminded them of what he intended for them. Survival is the starting block, necessary, yes, but definitely not a destiny. We need to take steps. It connects us with our purpose. It's a sign of movement. It's a sign of growth. Increase. Increase. Do not for a moment believe that living in the land of exiles allows us or should allow us to embrace the mindset of the exiles, the attitude of the exiles, or the outcomes of the exiles. Wherever we find ourselves, we need to be reminded of what God intended and intends for us. Baby steps are hardly steps, but they're still steps. I was in the car yesterday with my son, and we were talking about honesty. And he says to me, what do you do when you can't be honest? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, when you have to lie. Give me an example. And he's like, well, when you say good job to something that's not really a good job. And so I'm like, I have no idea where this was coming from. It was so left field. And then he says to me, well, for example, now, where's Jesse or Nate? How old's Harvey? 4. So he goes, so when like Harvey might draw something? My boy's like 10. When Harvey might draw something and you say, good job, but it's not really that good. And I say, mate, everything's in the context of where somebody is in their development. So I said, if your sister, who's 19, if she draws like Harvey, I'm not saying good job. But for a 4-year-old, he's doing a good job. You might be at a stage and a position in your life where you look at the steps that everyone else is making and you're going, oh, that's way beyond where I'm at. But for it to be recognized as a decent step, I've got to be able to do it. No, you don't. Take steps according to where you're at. Just move. Just start stepping forward. Every step we take is a step forward. You might have survived, but you're angry. Just take a step. You might have survived, but you're bitter. Take a step. You might have survived, but you're broke or lonely or cynical. Just take a step. Just one step forward. In verse 7, it reads this. It says, "And work for the peace and the prosperity of the city where I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare." So we've got these Israelites that have been taken from their land. They've been exiled. They've been taken by force and placed in this other environment. Then God's come to them, spoken through the prophet Jeremiah, and he's saying these words to them. He's like, okay, thanks for surviving, guys, because now I've got an audience to write to. This is the first thing that you needed to do. But let me remind you of what God actually intended for you. This is what you need to do. Make sure that you increase, don't decrease. Multiply, don't dwindle. Keep stepping forward and moving. And these things are great steps and they're great movements forward. And then we get to this place where he says, "And work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I sent you into exile." Whoa. Okay, God, I can deal with the other ones. I can survive. I can take a step. I can hold on to the thing that you've intended for us originally. But now you're wanting me to work for the peace and the prosperity of the place that I am in exile, where I've been forcefully taken to. And not only do you want me to work for its peace and prosperity, you want me to pray for the land. You want me to pray for its welfare, and if I don't, then the consequences are sort of coming back to me, because he says, pray for the welfare, because that will be your welfare. This is a very challenging message that he's sending them. The land and the city where you find yourself, it needs us. And I'm telling you now, it's so much easier to be critical and judgmental and to cast curses upon the environments that we find ourselves in because they're challenging and we don't really think that they're from God. But I'm telling you, God will use every situation that we find ourselves in. And we need to work for the peace. We need to work for its prosperity, and we need to be able to pray to the Lord for its welfare. While others come and they work and seek division and accusation, they love to just stir it up. Let's just stir up some division in this place. Let's just find something that's going on in our community and we'll just begin to wedge the people of God apart. We'll just begin to wedge the community away from the people of God, because when we do that, it's so much easier to create even a bigger division. We're commanded to work for peace and prosperity. Don't condemn our streets. Don't condemn our suburb. Don't condemn our cities. Work for the peace and prosperity of our city. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine our welfare. God's strategy to inoculate us from carrying hurt, unforgiveness, bitterness towards the environment that we find ourselves in is to pray for peace and prosperity and for those that have impacted our ideal. God flips it on its head and he invites us to bring this garden of delight. That's what Eden means, delight. This garden of delight. I've placed you in this hostile environment, but now I'm inviting you to bring a garden of delight into that place. There's domestic violence through our homes. There's gender ideology through our schools. There's youth crime on our streets. God isn't saying speak blessing upon the issue. What he's saying is speak blessing upon the people and upon the city and upon the land, peace and prosperity. So we've got survive, we've got step, we've got speaking. And then the final part, and I'll just invite you to keep standing, I'll only be up for a few more moments, is this: to share. Hebrews 3 verse 13 says this: encourage one another daily. We hear the word encourage and we don't necessarily associate it with the word courage, which is weird because it's in it. And to encourage means this: to put heart or courage into someone. To promote courage within another. That's what encourage means. And so here we are today learning about what courage is and where we find it and how we begin to outwork it and see it in our lives. But the Bible is very clear that this shouldn't just be a reflection of our life. This should also be something that we promote in others. And I feel like this is what I'm doing this morning. I'm just trying to stir. I'm trying to fan this flame of courage. For some of you, it's already there. It's like, yeah, I'm moving, I'm going. This one's just going to keep me running harder. And for others, it's just like, I can feel it. I can feel it. Job 16, verse 1 through to 5, says this from verse 2. It says, then Job replied, I've heard many things like these, you're miserable comforters, all of you. He was having a bit of a tussle with some friends. We long-winded speeches never end. I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you, but my mouth, it will encourage you. Comfort from my lips will bring you relief. God, that we would be promoters of courage, that we could have the breath of courage that is imparted to others. When Paul wrote to the Thessalonians, there's all these challenges that they're going from. They're under persecution. There's job difficulties. There's businesses are coming under attack. They're being ostracized and outcast. They're having challenges with friends and families because of who they're believing in. And Paul writes this, he says, so speak encouraging words to one another. Build up hope so that you'll all be together in this. No one left out and no one left behind. In Esther 4, we have Mordecai and we have Esther. And there's this critical moment that's happening in the storyline of Israel and the Jewish people. Mordecai says this: you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Again, it's another beautiful line that we love to use. We love to use it when people are sort of moving from one position to another, or they find themselves in a particular circumstance, and it's encouraging. But in the context of where she was, she had to confront the king, and the consequence of confronting the king was death. You've been born for such a time as this. You're going to need some courage. You're going to need some strength. You're going to have to understand the conviction that lies within so that you can go forward. So this morning I want to remind us of this. We are a courageous people, and that is who we are. You might not feel it. You might not like it. You might never had it spoken to you or about you. But if you find yourself in this place this morning, I'm declaring it over all of us. We are a courageous people. We are a courageous people. Keep breathing. Get moving. Speak blessing and pass it on. Keep breathing. Get moving. Speak blessing and pass it on.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope you were encouraged as you listened to today's message. Have a wonderful week, and we hope to see you again on Sunday. See you later, church.